Draft week's finally here, and I wanted to give you some thoughts on the Seahawks and the draft in general as we prepare for the first round on Thursday. So, first of all, with the Seahawks, I've been saying all the way through this process that I think that if Talies Fuaga or Troy Fatano last to number 16, that I think the Seahawks would stick and pick. And to a certain extent, I still believe that because I think they address critical needs for the Seahawks on the offensive line. They both have the playing style, the aggressiveness, and the athleticism that I think will work with Ryan Grubb and Scott Huff as they try and build up this offensive line. They've got positional versatility, so you can bring them in. You could play them at guard, you could play them at right tackle, depending on Abe Lucas's situation. So I think they'd be perfect. The thing that's given me a little bit of pause is when I interviewed Tony Pauline on Friday, he mentioned in our interview that there had been a knee issue flagged in Fatanu's medicals. And then today, Albert Breer has written some notes for Sports Illustrated, and he has also mentioned that Fatanu's knee has been flagged. And he says that it's not a short-term issue. It's nothing that would necessarily prevent him from playing this year, but it's maybe a longevity concern as to, how much further beyond that first contract it would not be an issue. He also qualifies it a little bit by saying that teams believe his football character is so good that he will do whatever it takes to keep it as healthy as possible. But I think some teams will probably overlook that. From a Seahawks perspective, you do wonder a little bit, though, just because they have the Abe Lucas situation with his knee. Do they want to take that? If it is a risk based on their own medicals, do they want to take that? I don't know. So the picture's a little bit cloudy than it was before. If it wasn't for that, he would be perfect for them in every single way. I still think he's the best left tackle in the draft. If you wanted to play him at guard, fine. I just think he's a fantastic player. So, like I said, I still think there's a decent chance that if either of those players last to 16, Seahawks stick and pick. That has made me think a little bit. And I'm not sure Fuaga's going to make it to number 16. I really don't. I think there's very little chance of that anyway. So what happens if they're not there? That is, I think, the trigger to trade down. That there may be other players that they feel like we've got to stick and pick. Byron Murphy may well have been one of those players, but all of the buzz in the last few days is that he's not going to last to number 16. So I think forget that one. So assuming he's gone, Fatano and Fuaga have gone, I think right now it feels almost inevitable that the Seahawks are going to trade down. And if they do, what does that mean? I think if they trade into the 20s, let's say, the Eagles feel like a very reasonable trade partner. You're not moving too far down the board to take you completely out of the range of the appealing prospects. But you are moving down and getting some stock. And we know the Eagles like to be aggressive. I think a lot of people are saying the Eagles would be prepared to move up for a cornerback, and maybe that's their biggest need. But Howie Roseman has continuously been a trenches drafter in the first round. So I also wonder whether or not they would move up for somebody who could play right guard this year and replace Lane Johnson in 2 years, 3 years, or whatever. They like to prepare and plan ahead on their offensive line. They've done that with Jason Kelsey at center. And they drafted 2 centers and played them at guard. So, but wanted to be ready for when Kelsey moves on. So I can easily imagine that the Eagles will trade up for someone saying like J.C. Latham or Amarius Mims or somebody like that who plays right guard initially and then kicks out to right tackle. Look, their pass rush is always an option as well with the Eagles. So I think they're a very realistic trade partner. When you look sort of down at Green Bay could be as well, but when you get to 25, that's when some of the attractive options are kind of fading a little bit there. It might be a bit too risky. So I think 22 in the Eagles is a fair range. And once you get into that range, I think there are 2 things. Firstly, if Graham Barton gets past the Steelers and the Dolphins, then he's obviously an appealing option. He is incredibly solid, very athletic. His tape's good, positional versatility again. Whether they would want to take someone who is strictly an interior offensive lineman at the next level with the 22nd pick, I'm not sure. I did mock that the other day. I wouldn't rule it out. I think Steve Hutchinson will like him. He's very similar in terms of measurables to Steve Hutchinson, and Steve Hutchinson has a big influence on the Seahawks defensive line as a person that they turn to as an advisor. So I can imagine him liking him, but whether they would take an interior offensive line that early, not entirely sure. But I do think he could be an option. The other thing to think of here, and when you sort of look at the mock drafts now, and I've sort of done 100 in the last week, just trying to piece together what I think I'm going to go with for my final mock draft on Wednesday. And increasingly, it does seem as if some really good defensive linemen are going to last into the early 20s. Now, how many of them will last? Not sure, because there's always a chance that someone like Arizona could trade up from 27 and go and get one. But the Latus, Verse, Robinson, even Turner, they could be well into the teens and maybe one or two of them last into the 20s. So if you trade down to 22, you may still find that you have a player that's top 10 on your board or top 12 that's available at 22 just because teams have got other needs. So I do think there's a chance that they would go pass rusher there. And I'm going to keep mentioning this name just because, again, it's just a feeling based on what I think about the Seahawks and stuff. And I'm going to explain it a little bit. And I know a lot of people don't like this, but I legitimately think Darius Robinson could be a big time target for them. Mike McDonald runs a two-gap scheme. Darius Robinson is perfectly fitted to a two-gap scheme. When you listen to people talk about him, for example, the scouting sources that Bob McGinn quoted, they were just talking about how violent and physical he is, that it doesn't matter that he ran a 4.95 or whatever it was, because he's so strong, he's so powerful, he wins anyway, and he can disengage and he can get to the quarterback. And the only reason he's slow is because he's 285 pounds, he's not 250 pounds. So, yeah, he's never going to run a great 40, but he can win off the edge because of his build. I was listening to Greg Cassell talking about Darius Robinson today, and he loves the guy. And you just look at his frame, people go, "Oh, this is LJ Collier all over again." They couldn't be more different, the two players. Like, I liked LJ Collier. I wouldn't have done what the Seahawks did in that draft, but I liked LJ Collier as a player. And he was very different to Darius Robinson in terms of his frame, his build, totally different. His style, Collier was like as weird as it sounds, a dynamic edge rusher who didn't test well. Yes, he was a bit bigger, but all of his wins were like speed and bend off the edge, using his length. And when you watch Darius Robinson, he's just an F the play up specialist. He's ungainly, he's all arms and legs sometimes, but there is something to be said for a guy who's 285 pounds, has got minimal body fat, and has got huge vines for arms and knows how to use them and can just blow people off the line, which is what he does. And when I think of what I've read about Mike McDonald's scheme and him saying how much versatility means to him and the fact that this guy can line up pretty much anywhere, and if you want to run stunts, which let's believe that Mike McDonald does, it's very easy to imagine him sort of just like you could put him next to Leonard Williams and they could easily occupy one side of the line 2 against 3 with their disruptive ability. And then you could have, there's blitz opportunities there. I know that Mike McDonald's not a big blitzer, but you could blitz off that. Or if you wanted to play those two in the middle and then have an edge rusher off that, if they're blowing up that side of the line, it makes it easier for the edge. It can create all sorts of, you can stunt off that. If you've got two people like soaking up one side of the line, someone coming across to that side. So you can have one side that's not really blocking anybody, one side's blown up, you've got the other guy peeling around, free runs to the quarterback. It's very easy to imagine those kind of things. It's very easy to imagine him being very effective versus the run. And then you look at other things like the Seahawks have put a lot of priority on character. I mean, they have said it for the last 2 years. Character without compromise. Now, we don't know how things will change now that Pete Carroll is gone, but Devin Witherspoon, like A+ football character. There was no issues with Charles Cross, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Boya Mafe, Derek Hall, Zach Charbonnet. These were all sort of, if nothing else, zero problem character people. There were no risks involved there. And Darius Robinson, from all you hear, is He was the one arranging for extra practice sessions at Missouri and getting his teammates together. He was the one who just he wherever he went, the rest of the team followed. His nickname with Missouri was Mr. Mizzou. I interviewed Mackay Wingo, who was at Missouri before transferring to LSU, and he said basically Robinson taught him how to be a pro. So you've got all of that to factor in. We know the Seahawks put a lot of faith in the Senior Bowl. Darius Robinson was voted Player of the Week, offense or defense. He was the overall Player of the Week in Mobile this year. I just think he's somebody who kind of the Seahawks don't have. And everyone's kind of like a bit obsessed with going, well, in Baltimore, they had Kyle Hamilton, so they need to find a Kyle Hamilton. Or in Baltimore, they had Madubuike, so they've got to find a Madubuike. They had Patrick Queen, they've got to find a Patrick Queen or a Roquan Smith. I don't think it's that at all. I think the Seahawks are just going to build a defense based on players that they can acquire, and Mike Macdonald's going to cook up a scheme to suit the players that they've got. And I wouldn't read too much into what personnel the Ravens had. And I suspect if you actually look over the years at the personnel the Ravens had, it's been a bit of a big mixed bag. But they've not always had the same types of players. Like Kyle Hamilton and Marcus Williams are not the same as like Ed Reed or Earl Thomas, who they've also signed. So there's all sorts of things you could, or Matt Elam, who they drafted in like the second round back in the day. Like there's been quite a variation of players that they've had. This is a team that signed Calais Campbell. This is a team that last year didn't have anybody who was sub 300 pounds. So I do think they're not strict on body types or anything like that. It really is about getting the best players and then putting them together. And yeah, I could imagine them getting somebody who can do what he does, disrupt, mess things up at the front, just make life a bit easier for your Leonard Williamses and your edge rushers. And can play across the line. Can play. He can probably play 3 technique on a third and long. He can probably play 5 technique in most situations. He can probably play 4. He can probably play in space if you wanted him to. I don't know. Like there's. If here's the other thing with the sort of the stunts thing. When you watch sort of Florida State, and this is one thing I've noticed with watching Braden Fisk and Jared Verse, is that Verse would just put his head down and run straight into the offensive line and smash them inside, and Braden Fisk could sort of stunt outside. Now, if you wanted Darius Robinson to just run over the right tackle and the guard and just run into both of them, wipe them out, and have an athletic defensive tackle stunting inside, like if you drafted Mackay Wingo in round 4, let's say, apart from the fact that they're friends, he'd be ideal for that kind of role, an athletic stunt inside. Perfect. So you could create a lot of havoc with somebody like Darius Robinson. And listen, whenever I talk about players for more than 5 minutes, everyone kind of pigeonholes you as that's the guy. All I'm trying to do here is, you can go on most places and find a deep conversation about why the Seahawks need to draft an offensive lineman, or why they need to draft a specific offensive lineman, or why Byron Murphy would be a good fit, or any of this stuff. I want to try and bring a take to the table, which I don't think has been heavily discussed. I think from a character point of view, from a playing style point of view, from an excellent Senior Bowl point of view, from a we don't have anybody like this point of view, and somebody who can just bring violence and toughness to the front as well, because I do think the Seahawks need a bit of that. And yeah, if Byron Murphy's there at 16, maybe they'll just go with that route, and he'll be the version of this. But if he's not going to be there, then maybe they will just go and take Darius Robinson. And why him over, say, a Verse or a Robinson, who I love, both of those players? Well, I guess the reason is because this team has already paid Uchenna and Wosu a lot of money. This team has already spent a second-round pick on Boya Mafe. They spent a second pick on Derek Hall. Now, you may think that Derek Hall's no good after his rookie season. John Schneider gave him a first-round grade 12 months ago. So unless John Schneider's deciding after 1 year he got that epically wrong, I imagine he's banking on Mike Macdonald to do a better job with Derek Hall than Pete Carroll and Clint Hurd did. And I think there's every chance of that. Derek Hall was an excellent athlete. He ran a 1.59 10-yard split, 4.20 short shuttle. He's got 34.5-inch arms. He is physical and tough. Like, he needs developing. That's the coaches have got to get something out of him now because he's a good player. Just didn't see any of it in a rookie year. That can happen sometimes. That can happen. I mean, Boya Mafe was very quiet as a rookie, and this was consistent with the Carroll, where like Frank Clark had a quiet rookie season. Like I think it's time for Mike McDonald to come in and be a breath of fresh air in that regard and get more out of these younger players earlier. So I think he can transform Hall, and they've retained Daryl Taylor, who John Schneider not only spent a second round pick on, but traded up in round 2 to get. So he clearly rates the guy. Now we can all see, look, he's terrible against the run. He's a bloody liability in that regard. And as a pass rusher, he's not had enough of an impact over the years to have any faith in whatsoever. He's most famous for being on the sideline when an interception was made and then running onto the field as the play was being run back and the referee's not noticing. That's not what you want to be remembered for in the NFL. But again, they've re-signed him. And I think Schneider's point of view is that they may well draft an edge rusher and just cut Taylor and save $3 million. But I think his position on this might be, well, get Mike McDonald in, and that player that I thought was good enough to trade up for in round 2, we'll see if he can live up to expectations now as a rotational rusher in McDonald's system. That's 4 edge rushers. You draft Jared Verse or Shop Robinson, does that mean that Boya Mafe hardly sees the field? It means that Derek Hall definitely sees none of the field, and you can cut Taylor. But, you've spent 2 second-round picks for what? Rotational pass rushers then? And that just doesn't seem like a good use of resources. So you'd have to really believe that Verse or Robinson was like the next Max Crosby or something if you were going to do that. So they might be more likely to take somebody who can offer something a bit different on the defensive line. And they may have loved to have Byron Murphy who can do that as a defensive tackle. But maybe instead they go for someone like Darius Robinson who can, like say, play across the line, be quite versatile, and produce an attitude that the Seahawks defense has not had in a long time. I do not think that if because people can come about, you sign angry, aggressive players all the time. Well, the Seahawks have not been doing that for a long time, actually. People talk about LJ Collier. They've actually been quite finesse drafters. Like Charles Cross is a finesse tackle. They drafted a smaller cornerback and a smaller wide receiver in the first round last year, both in the top 20. They have not been drafting big, tough, nasty individuals. And the end product, to an extent, has been getting your ass kicked by the Steelers in your own backyard at the end of last season. I think if you draft more players like Darius Robinson, that's less likely to happen. So, like I say, I'm just bringing a point of view. I'm not going to be dancing around the room if they draft the guy. I'm just saying that it feels like a Seahawks pick. And the one thing I haven't mentioned that I should mention is Georgia. I think everyone agrees Georgia football team is a good team. Kirby Smart went on the podium before they played Missouri and sung his praises and singled Darius Robinson out as the guy that they've got to watch. And I watched a fair bit of Missouri football last year because I'll confess it's because of the quarterback more than anything else. I was watching the quarterback because I thought he might declare. They were one of the most fun teams to watch. They were tough, physical. They beat teams up like South Carolina with ease. They were highly competitive all year. It was a pleasure to watch them. And I didn't focus on Darius Robinson at the time. As I say, I was focusing on the quarterback. Wasn't focusing on the defense much at all during the season. But now, then when you sort of go back, you say, that was a tough defense. And they played well above expectation in the SEC. So, I don't know. I think he's an intriguing player who has less athletic Jadeveon Clowney written all over him, with the ability, I think Clowney's always played better lighter and working as an edge, whereas I think this guy plays better in the size he was last season. And the way he played at the Senior Bowl was enticing. So I just think there's a chance the Seahawks will take him. And if they do trade down to 22, we'll see what they can get in a trade. Like it could be that they get a third. I don't think Philadelphia have a third, actually, but maybe Philadelphia give a second. They can be quite aggressive and they're always willing to trade around. So maybe they move down with their other second round pick because they've got 2. If they trade out and get the second, then I do think there's a good chance the Seahawks will be thinking quarterback. I'm increasingly thinking the Seahawks are going to take a quarterback in this draft. The reason for that is there's just been a bit of smoke, and I'm a big no smoke without fire guy. And I know a lot of you aren't, and a lot of you fought every step of the way in the Russell Wilson trade saga, but there was clearly smoke and fire there. And I think there was clearly smoke and fire when the Seahawks were being really non-committal on Geno Smith a few weeks ago. And then Adam Schefter putting out the tweet saying, well, they're not going to cut him. His contract's going to be guaranteed. But, wow, what a value deal this is for, there could be a trade market here. Yeah, come on. I think you have to try really hard not to just understand what that report was. And Schefter is well established. I'm not saying anything out of turn to say that he's very much operates on a quid pro quo basis. Like he is willing to report stuff and put stuff out there which does sources a favor in return for getting the stories that he wants down the line first. And yeah, that was him helping out the Seahawks. So I bring all of that up because there's that smoke. I think the Seahawks always intended to draft a quarterback this year. I think they were very happy and willing to see what people were offering for Geno Smith at the combine, with the intention of maybe getting up in the board and getting a specific quarterback, or targeting someone like Michael Penix. Obviously, there was no trade in the end. I suspect there wasn't quite the market there for Geno Smith, which isn't a huge surprise because a year ago there wasn't much market either, which is why he came back to the Seahawks on the deal that he did. And yeah, they brought in Sam Howell, and I would like a lot of other people thought, well, that's just them saying they don't think they can get a quarterback this year, and therefore they want to make sure that they come away with a young quarterback, so they've done a deal for one. But as time's gone on, I feel less and less that way. They had to have a backup quarterback to go into this draft. You couldn't go into the draft with one quarterback on the roster. And just in the way that they couldn't go into the draft with no left guard, so they signed Laken Tomlinson. They couldn't go into the draft with no linebackers, so they signed 2 in free agency. They couldn't go into the draft with 1 safety, so they signed 2 in free agency. They've just hedged every position to free up the ability to do whatever they want in the draft. So the Howell trade, which it wasn't a big trade, it was just a swap of picks. They swapped picks. Like, I didn't like the swap because I think the 3rd round pick this year is better than a 4th round pick. But it was a pick swap. So it wasn't an expensive trade. And the benefit of signing or trading for Howell versus signing one of the veterans is the veterans were going for $8 to $10 million, which the Seahawks couldn't afford. Sam Howell's going to cost a bag of footballs because he's on a rookie contract from the 5th round. So it made sense to that extent to swap your picks and make sure that you didn't come out of the draft without anything at quarterback. But now, as we're sort of a few days away from the draft, I don't think any of that stops the Seahawks from drafting a quarterback if there's one they like. There are a few things that maybe think there's a chance that they are going to draft one. One is, I was watching a mock draft with Rick Spielman on CBS a few days ago. It was a 3-round mock, and he had the Seahawks pick 81. And he's not, this is not something they've talked about, because I watched most of the episodes on that CBS podcast with Ryan Wilson and Rick Spielman. It's been very entertaining. They're a fantastic duo with great chemistry. But they've never talked about this. And then he just got at 81 and randomly said, I'm going to throw a curveball here. I'm going to give the Seahawks Michael Pratt, quarterback, Tulane. I thought, it's interesting that. I didn't divulge why he'd sort of had that punch. But Rick Spielman is connected. Former Vikings GM, was most recently part of the ownership situation with Washington in setting up their front office. So he is somebody who speaks to people in the league. And I think he's probably heard on the grapevine that the Seahawks intend to draft a quarterback. At the same time, we had Peter Schrager putting out that the 2 teams that he's heard most connected with Michael Penix Jr., the Raiders and the Seahawks. There's been a little bit of chit-chat about Penix in other places as well, to Seattle and the potential of them drafting him if he lasts to number 16. Brady Henderson, who is extremely well connected and a fantastic reporter for ESPN covering the Seahawks, randomly shared an article about Spencer Rattler last week. Makes you think, doesn't it? And then there was nothing in that article about the Seahawks, by the way. Get it? Because maybe he likes Spencer Rattler's play, or maybe he's hearing something. There's a smidgen of interest there in Spencer Rattler, who did come for an official 30 visit with the Seahawks. And then you had Adam Schefter's tidbit article on Monday, where he dedicated a whole section to will the Seahawks draft a quarterback, which is, like I said, the most blatant quid pro quo report I've seen in a while. This is not a national talking point. Will the Seahawks draft a quarterback? No one's talking about it. So to single this out as a thing of interest for anybody other than like you and I, obsessed with the Seahawks draft, I mean, come on. I think the Seahawks have got a sense that people are increasingly talking about the fact that they're probably going to draft a quarterback, and have got their buddy at ESPN to try and pour a bit of cold water on this by saying that, yeah, well, maybe they will, but hey, they do like Sam Howell. I think John Schneider, as I've said since Pete left, has been itching to draft a quarterback for a long time. And I think he's especially itching to do so now. I think that the man who was the director of football operations in Green Bay when they drafted Brian Brome in the second round in 2008, despite already having on the roster Brett Favre and first round pick Aaron Rodgers, there is absolutely no reason why he wouldn't draft a quarterback in the second, third, or fourth round this year to pair with Geno Smith, who's a short-term option on a short-term contract, and Sam Howell, who is a shot to nothing, really, and is cheap for 2 years. And that they've already said is the backup to Geno Smith. There is absolutely nothing stopping the Seahawks drafting a quarterback. Whether that's Penix, Rattler, Pratt, there's nothing stopping it. So my thought process on this is that Seahawks, if they can trade down, because I think they're going to have to, they could take Pratt in round 4, round 3. If they want Rattler, I think they're going to have to get a second round pick. So if they do trade down into the 20s, take either an offensive lineman or a defensive lineman, I think then that could potentially set them up to go quarterback in the second round. It would be the quote unquote, shocking Seahawks pick if it was Spencer Rattler. I don't think it was shocking at all. At all. He is, for me, a John Schneider type quarterback. Creative, improvises, throws well on the run, can attack every blade of grass with his arm. He, for me, showed amazing progress last year. Statistically, might not have been amazing, and people can talk about how Rattler played last year behind a horrendous offensive line with only Xavier Legette to throw to. I thought that he limited the forced throws that we've seen both in his first year at South Carolina and at Oklahoma. He was making far fewer mistakes. He was playing within structure a lot better. By the way, that structure was from a former NFL offensive coordinator, unlike the rest of the quarterbacks in college football who are playing college systems. I think it's very easy to imagine the Seahawks going, we're going to take a shot on this guy. Here's the guy who has the talent to be mocked in the top 5 a few years ago, and he was humbled internationally with what happened at Oklahoma. He's bounced back at South Carolina. We're going to see if there's something there. And frankly, if you are taking shots on quarterbacks in round 2 with his natural talent, I have absolutely no issue with that whatsoever. And nobody else should either. I know what the reaction will be. There'll be a bunch of pissing and moaning. But I think people did that when they drafted Russell Wilson in 2012 because, Matt Flynn's the starter, and the rest was history there. So I think we could definitely see someone like Rattler coming in. And if it's not him, I think Pratt's arm is not as good downfield. He's very athletic, and I thought in terms of showing some balls, that performance against Oklahoma a couple of years ago, what a performance that was. And it was really eye-catching when I watched it live and sort of rewatching it again recently. It did show some balls there, and teams are like that. But I think limited physically in terms of the arm, certainly not got a bad arm, but not got an arm like Rattler or Penix. So I think probably early 4th, more likely than 3rd. But I do think they're going to draft a quarterback unless the board works against them. Players come off the board earlier. They have upsets. They can't trade down and get the second round pick. I do think they're going to draft a quarterback. And let's imagine a scenario where they go, let's say, Darius Robinson or Jared Verse or whoever in round 1, and then take Spencer Rattler in round 2 after trading down and getting the second round pick off, say, the Eagles. People go, well, what about the offensive line? And I absolutely hear that. Maybe John's bluffing when he goes, I think interior offensive linemen are overpaid and overdrafted. Maybe that was a great piece of misdirection in the media to hide his draft intentions. But just to note that the Seahawks were quite happy to draft Anthony Bradford in round 4, Damian Lewis in round 3, and Ollie Wallamateamy in round 5, and start those guys. And at the moment, it's looking pretty likely that Wallamateamy will start at centre as a 5th round pick, and Bradford will start as a 4th round pick. And I think they've both got talent. I'm not sold on them because they're not proven players. Like if you sign a proven NFL veteran, you know what you're going to get. And we don't know that with these two. But I think Scott Huff and Ryan Grubb are going to get this O-line going. So I'm intrigued to see what they can do rather than fearing it. And if they are of the mindset that they can find guys who can start and work, and the Ravens did exactly the same thing. The Ravens drafted mid-round guards. Their guys are not big first-round picks. So if they want competition for Lake and Tomlinson, 81, 34th, 5th, I think in this draft you can find guys in that. If the Seahawks took Trevor Keegan in I don't know, 6th round or something, I don't know where he's going to go. I mean, I think he could go a bit earlier than that. But all of the grading is going to have in that range. I think he could start for you. He played like 44 games at left guard for Michigan. They had a great offensive line. I think he can do you a job. So I'm not that worried about it. I think that could be the round 3 target, though, if they go defensive line, quarterback, then it could be O-line. And maybe they use one of their 4th rounders to move up a little bit if there's a particular offensive lineman that they want. Or maybe they trade like a pick next year or something to jump up a little bit. And they did that with Tyler Lockett, didn't they? So maybe they'll do something similar in round 3 this year. And then, a lot of people think, they've got to go linebacker, they've got to go safety. Yeah, I think they will. I don't think there's the pressing need at those positions. I think the 2 linebackers they brought in, they're going to start. And I think their intention is that they play well and they retain them. I think that's what they're hoping for. I think if you spend a high pick on a linebacker, then they don't start this year, and then the 2 guys that you've signed end up playing really well, you've just drafted a backup with a high pick. So I don't think they're going to do that. I think someone like Michael Barrett later on to play great special teams and be a solid backup Mike, who could be in the right place, the right time. I think that would make a lot of sense. I think there's other players who could do that. Tyrese Knight just flies around and hits people. It's a bit out of control, but Mike McDonald could be making more control. So I think that's a possible option as well. There's other players who could run through a whole list of linebackers for you. And then at safety, I think there's going to be so much freaking value there, from round 4 onwards. Like Jim Nagy, when I interviewed him, said Malik Mustafa could go round 4. And I said, if Malik Mustafa's there in round 4, take the guy. I love Dominic Hampton. If he's there in round 4, take the guy. Cam Kinchins, I'm not a big fan of, but there's going to come a point in the draft when if he's sinking, then he's going to provide some value at some point. So I'm not worried about those 2 positions. I think you can get decent potential starters down the line on day 3 at both of those positions. So I'm not too worried about that. So that's what I'm thinking with the Seahawks. I just wanted to finish with a very brief thought on how the top 10 is going to go. And when I'm doing mock drafts, I get to pick 9 and struggle a bit to work out what the Bears are going to do. I think increasingly I'm thinking they're going to go pass rusher just because their biggest need is to find help from Montez Sweat. It's kind of a one-man band in terms of dynamic pass rush. I think that's possibly the way that they go, but we'll see. I think the Jets are going to have to go offensive line because I think the receivers and Brock Bowers are going to be gone. So I think that Fuaga's probably going to be the Jets' pick at that point. But I'm feeling pretty comfortable. I wouldn't say I'm feeling confident because you never feel confident, but I'm feeling very comfortable with how I've got the first 7 picks going. I think in the first 7, we are going to have, obviously, the 3 quarterbacks are going to go 1, 2, 3. I think it's going to go Caleb Williams to the Bears. Washington will take Jaden Daniels. And I think the Patriots will stick and take Drake May because ownership will not want to risk missing out. I think I'm right in saying the Patriots have one of Roma Dunze's former receiver coaches working for them now. So they might have a lot of intel on Michael Penix. And then maybe they would trade down and take Penix. But I think they're going to take May and not risk missing out on quarterback. I think Arizona will ask for too much to trade out number 4 because they will think, well, we've got Marvin Harrison. So I think they will stay at number 4. They've already got a lot of picks. Like eventually you've got to take some players, some quality players. You can't just keep trading for more picks all the time, moving around the board so you can make funky little videos of your GM. Oh, look at what a wheeler dealer he is. Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah, the guy took Paris Johnson, like 6th overall last year. Well done. The defensive rookie of the year now plays in Texas for Houston for the Texans. So congrats. Great job. But, those social media videos get lots of views. And then, if Arizona don't budge, I think LA will be more receptive to trading down at a cheaper price. And that could be where Minnesota jumps up to get JJ McCarthy. I'm intrigued by Denver just doing something stupid like trading away Patrick Surtain and boatloads of future picks to go and get JJ McCarthy to appease Sean Payton. But that would be very typical for a franchise that have just revealed horrendous new uniforms on the same day that they brought out perfect throwbacks and teased the fans with, look how good the throwbacks are, but look how terrible the typical jersey is going to be week after week, which will make everybody want to just get rid of the new jerseys ASAP, like the Jets have done, and go back to the throwbacks. So well done to the Broncos that. And you traded for Zach Wilson today. So them doing something stupid like trading all the way up for JJ McCarthy, giving up Patrick Surtain will be classic Broncos there. But I think the Vikings having 2 first-round picks, I think they know what they're doing with that, and they're going to trade up for McCarthy. And then I think neighbours to Giants at 6, and I'm putting Brock Bowers to the Titans. I do not think that the Titans are just going to take an offensive tackle because they've got this void at left tackle. They have brought in the best offensive line coach in the NFL to work with his son to coach that offensive lineup. And I think that they will view this as a unique opportunity to get a fantastic weapon. Nuke Hopkins is, how long has he got? 1 more year? Traylon Burks is a bust. So they've got one receiver tied up, Calvin Ridley, long term. They are going to add another weapon. I'm telling you. This is the coach, Callahan, who did an interview when he was the Bengals offensive coordinator and said the modern NFL is all about quarterback receivers, weapons, getting your main players the ball. And they drafted Jamar Chase over Penei Sewell, even though they had T. Higgins. That's their mentality. And every time they're going to draft Joe Alt, they're going to draft an offensive lineman. It's not what the Bengals did. That's where his DNA is from. So I think they're much more likely to take Rome Odunze or Brock Bowers, dynamic mismatch weapon, and then reach for a tackle in round 2, whether that's the BYU guy or Patrick Paul. Neither of which I think they're like round 3 at best talents. But the talk seems to be that they're going to go earlier than that. So I think that this offensive line coach can turn Patrick Paul's technique into a functioning left tackle. Good luck finding someone like Brock Bowers. And all the people going, but you can't draft a tight end early because of the value. You can. Brock Bowers is, someone on the blog said this, and I agree completely. He's Christian McCaffrey, but a tight end version. You can move him everywhere. He's basically a receiver, but he can block and he can do all that stuff as well. He's a top player in this draft. He might be the third best player in the draft, frankly. So the only player that I think Odunze is an option there as well. So I think they're the sort of the 7 that I go with. And then Atlanta number 8. I think there's a chance that Minnesota are going to end up with Atlanta's pick because of the meddling with Kirk Cousins that Atlanta supposedly did in the tampering period. That it makes you wonder whether they will swap Minnesota and Atlanta's picks, which has been a little bit of a whisper, so that Minnesota ends up at number 8 and Atlanta ends up at number 11. So we'll see what happens there. And if that happens, maybe the Vikings don't even have to trade up for JJ McCarthy. But if Atlanta stays number 8 and they do lose picks as a consequence of that, trading down seems very plausible for them. And I think the Jacksonville Jaguars need, especially losing Calvin Ridley, need an X factor at wide receiver, and could well imagine them trading up to number 8 to go and get Rome Odunze if he's still there. So that's kind of just some thoughts. And I think the early part of the draft is going, it is chaotic after that. Like trying to work out who does what afterwards is very, very difficult. But I've got about 36 hours to decide how I'm going to do it for my final mock draft, which will run on Wednesday. Just to let you know, tomorrow is horizontal board day, where I will put Tuesday. This is because depending on when you're watching this, Tuesday is when the final horizontal board will go live. Wednesday is when the final mock draft will go live. I have to be honest, I am absolutely hanging. I have been really sick since Saturday night. My wife has had this and was in the hospital today with. She's got pneumonia as a consequence, and I'm really hoping I don't get that especially this week, but I am really, really sick. So apologies if things are a bit slower getting out there or whatever, but I am going to plow on and get through this week because this is my favorite week of the year. So, in terms of the draft, the build up, and I haven't worked since last year to throw a sickie now. But I appreciate you all for listening to me waffle on for 40 minutes. SeahawksDraftBlog.com for all of those articles that are coming, and I'm going to be chucking all sorts out there. There's a cap piece with Curtis Allen on there now, which I'd go and check out. I'm going to chuck so much on there that there's going to be multiple articles a day, I think. Um, I will be part of the very start of Puck Sports live draft show. I'm probably going to do the first 20 minutes. Mike Garafolo is going to be on that from the NFL Network and various other great guests. And I will be joining Puck at the start. I do not live stream during the draft because I have, one, too much to do with the blog, and two, I like to enjoy watching it. I know that's the modern thing now. I do not think you guys want to listen to me for 4 hours just rambling on about each draft pick. So what I will do is I will do videos immediately reacting to the Seahawks picks throughout the draft, and we will do a live stream at the conclusion of every round. So not every round, every day. So after round one's finished, I'll be doing a stream, and Robbie's definitely going to join us for that. Adam will try and join us as well. Same for round 2 and 3 when they finish. Same for the conclusion on day 3, and then we will react to everything in the coming week when we know who the Seahawks have taken and what it means for the franchise. So lots going on. Like I say, SeahawksDraftBlog.com so you don't miss anything. Please subscribe to the channel. Let's get those numbers up. We're over 7,000 now. I'd love to set a target, getting a bit closer to 10,000 by the end of this draft season. So if you have watched any of the content and you just like the fact that we do Seahawks stuff here and the draft stuff, give the channel a subscribe, and I would really appreciate that. And if you would also give this video a like and just leave a comment in the comment section, it all helps. Even if it's just to say go Hawks, I'd really appreciate that as well. Okay. Enjoy draft week. I'll see you soon. But for now, take care. See you soon.